Thank you all for joining us. I had the pleasure of speaking with Judith on Forum maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago. So if you heard that conversation, you know that you're in for quite a treat. Judith, I'd love to, before we get started, tell us a little bit why this book is a little unique compared to most of the books that you've written, or read, I should say. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for your time tonight. Thanks to the Commonwealth Club and Dr. Smith. And I just flew in yesterday from upstate New York, and I have to say, it's so warm here. So, you lucky people.
We're freezing, just so you know.
Wimps. So what we love about the cover of this wonderful book, The Problem with Plastic, which I co-authored with Adam Mahoney, an incredible young journalist from New Orleans, is when you touch it, because you're going to buy it and you're going to hold it, there's no plastic cover on it. So this is highly unusual. Most books, you don't kind of notice it, but there's a little plastic sheen. So congrats to our publishers, The New Press, for putting this out without plastic on the cover. And we are now writing to all the major publishers in the country to ask them to do the same with future books. We're all about calls to action all the time.
Well, let's go back to a time when you wouldn't even have thought to put plastic on a book, kind of pre-plastic, and then kind of bring us up to the point where it became sort of throwaway living. And how did the petroleum industry infuse our lives so quickly, so dramatically with this, yes, let's just embrace and do plastic now and always?
Well, plastic was created in the early 1900s by a chemist, Leo Bakelite, and it was generally used, but really took off after World War II. But more significantly, we've been bombarded with so much plastic just in the last 25 years. None of us voted for more plastic. Nothing tastes better in plastic. But what happened, and a lot of people don't realize this, is because of hydrofracking, a type of drilling for gas, I don't call it natural gas, when you hydrofrack for gas, there's a lot of waste ethane, and what a lot of the big fossil fuel companies decided to do is capture some of that waste ethane, send it by new pipelines to these gigantic, expensive facilities called ethane cracker facilities, where they are used to make little tiny bits of what's called pre-production plastic pellets that are then shipped all over the country by rail, sometimes spilling into rivers, and they're hard to get back. They're like the size of a pea. And so in my home county in upstate New York, there was a train derailment, and millions of these pellets went into the Hoosick River. And once it gets into the river, it's really hard to get out. So we don't have choices often when we go to the supermarket, and we are inundated with so much plastic because of hydrofracking and because plastics is plan B for the fossil fuel industry. Can I explain that for a minute?
Please.
It's in the book, but we know that most fossil fuel is sold for electricity generation at power plants and also for transportation, cars and trucks. So what's going on in those two sectors? On the electricity side, we're finally investing in clean, renewable energy, innovation with energy efficiency, and so there's less demand for fossil fuel for electricity generation.
Coal plants are closing.
Yeah, finally. On the transportation side, who among us is not on a waiting list for an electric car? We have electric school buses, so less demand for fossil fuel for transportation. So the big fossil fuel companies have decided their new growth market is plastic production. The number one producer of plastic in the United States today is this little mom and pop company you may have heard of, ExxonMobil. So that is where the fossil fuel companies are shifting to.
And because they're shifting in that direction, what does that mean for climate change?
Nothing good. people don't think of plastics as a climate change issue, but it really is. Production, use, and disposal all have climate impacts. So we at Beyond Plastics published a report a couple of years ago because I was curious just how much greenhouse gas emissions are we seeing from plastics. And it's significant. It's over the greenhouse gas emissions that are the equivalent of over 500 coal-fired power plants. So while we're so dedicated to shutting down coal plants because of the greenhouse gas emissions, the contribution to acid rain, increase in health damage, asthma, cardiac disease, we're now replacing some of those greenhouse gas emissions from plastics. And again, all happening behind the curtain. No one is really being asked, do you want to replace greenhouse gas emissions from coal with plastic? I think most normal, sane people would say no, thank you. But this is happening and really directed by fossil fuel companies.
And a marketing success beyond measure, right? I mean, when plastics entered the market, it was, this is the thing you want to do. You want to buy all of your TV dinners in this and throw them away and buy disposable plastic silverware. And this is the life that an American would lead.
Especially a busy housewife. That was the target in the advertising, is you can just cook dinner and toss all the plates and the bowls into the garbage. And then microwave food. So if you've learned nothing else today, never put your food in plastic in the microwave. Plastic and heat are not perfect together.
And there's 16,000 chemicals you've reported in plastic.
Absolutely. Every piece of plastic has chemicals in it. And you kind of know this, right? Have you ever, in the olden days, before you read the book, you put microwavable food into your microwave and you kind of taste the plastic, right? You get that for no extra cost. And still, like I see ads on TV for busy people, and I've nothing against busy people having shortcuts in life. Like, you don't want to see me in the supermarket. I'm on roller skates. I'm doing banking. I would go to the dentist in the supermarket if I could. I am busy. So that's not a bad idea. So I see these advertisements where people order frozen food and it's mailed to them, often in black plastic, and then they're told to put it in the microwave. Are you kidding me? When it says microwave safe, that just means that the plastic is not going to melt when you put it in the microwave, but some chemicals do leach into the food when plastic is heated. Same concern if you're having a cup of tea. Do not have it in a polystyrene cup because it's very acidic, and the styrene, which is the suspected carcinogen, will leak into your lovely afternoon cup of tea.
And I imagine you don't want to have the black plastic lid on your coffee cup another reason maybe to bring your home cup here.
Bring your own cup. Black plastic brings a whole new set of problems because black plastic is typically made from electronic waste. Your old iPhone could be your spatula for your omelet in the morning. So I have a hard time throwing things out, as my relatives will attest to, but about 7 or 8 years ago, I started learning about black plastic. So I went into the kitchen and I took out I couldn't believe how many spatulas and spoons of black plastic. I piled them up and I just threw them out, which is not great because it goes to landfills and incinerators, but you do not want to have hot food with black plastic utensils.
All those takeout containers are not a great idea. The other, I think, marketing success in terms of the petroleum industry is they really sold us on recycling. Kind of walk us through how they did that and why that little triangle is really not accurate.
So keep recycling your paper, cardboard, metal, and glass. For the record, I love recycling. I started my town's recycling program in upstate New York when I was home on maternity leave. That's what I did when I was on maternity leave. I started organizations and I started a recycling program and occasionally changed the cloth diaper on the child. So keep recycling those materials, compost your yard waste and your food waste. But plastic recycling doesn't work. Most plastics never get recycled. And I want to carefully explain this so you understand. Don't just listen to me. So you mentioned, Leslie, 16,000 different chemicals used to make plastics, many different colors, and many different types of plastics called polymers. So think of your own apartment or your home. On top of a washing machine, you might have a bright orange hard plastic detergent bottle. And then in your refrigerator, you may have an unfortunate container of black plastic with food in it, and then a bread bag. None of those plastics can be recycled together because too many different chemicals, too many different colors, too many different polymers. So an aluminum can, for instance, when it's empty, can be recycled into a new aluminum can. A newspaper can be recycled into cardboard. But plastics recycling has been an abysmal failure. The plastic recycling rate in the US is 5 to 6%. I wrote an article in The Atlantic before The Atlantic was so cool a couple years ago, and the headline was something like, "Plastics recycling has never worked and never will work." I got very little pushback on that. And you know who knows this better than anyone? The people who make plastics. They have really smart engineers working for them. But you know who also knows? Your Attorney General here in California, Rob Bonta, in September of 2024, filed a lawsuit against ExxonMobil for deceiving the public about plastics recycling and chemical recycling. And Exxon tried to get the case dismissed. They failed. They're now trying to get it moved from state court to federal court. Wonder why. And Bonta is going to win this case because it's about math. And let me explain why. So millions of dollars was spent on advertising telling all of us, don't worry about all your plastics, just recycle it all.
And it is kind of, it makes it look like it. They've got those numbers, and as long as there's a number on there, you think, oh, it's got to be recyclable.
Right. And I do want to say that some number 1 and number 2 plastic does get recycled. Mostly beverage bottles and like milk jugs and detergent jugs, but that's about it. And mostly beverage bottles and bottle bill states. 10 states have bottle bills, refundable deposits. Your bottle bill is a little funky, but that material is kept source separated and clean. So Bonta,
the rest, the 3, 4, 5, 6, toss.
Yeah, it's going to wind up in the landfill or the incinerator anyway. So Bonta's going to win the case because he and his really smart assistant attorneys general will depose the LA recycling coordinator and say, how many plastic bags have you recycled in California? And the thing about recycling coordinators is they keep very good records, and they're lovely people. And they're going to say 0.0004. And then the AG is going to depose the San Francisco recycling coordinator. How much polystyrene have you recycled over the years? 0.0001. And a judge or a jury will just look at the numbers and then look at the deceptive advertising and say, the people of the state of California win. And what I think the injunctive relief probably would be is you have to stop deceiving the public about plastics recycling. When I tell people that most plastics don't get recycled, some people almost start crying. It's like telling children that there's no Santa Claus, as some people do. I
imagine most people in this room are here because they feel a little bit better that if they use the jug, it goes in the recycling bin. So you're saying keep doing it, keep doing the ones
and the twos,
but the real responsibility is not on us. That's what the companies did so well, is sort of we now feel responsible that we're using the plastic and so all we have to do is recycle, but that's not true. So how do we get out of that problem and turn the blame back on the producers?
Well, for one thing, the producers have to tell the truth, so they're not deceiving the public. There are consumer protection laws that that allow for that. Secondly, especially for food and beverage, you want to do everything you can to avoid using plastics, and we'll explain that in more detail. Look for alternatives to plastics, and the real future is in waste reduction, reuse, and refill. So children that go to school every day, wouldn't it be nice if they were served breakfast and lunch on real dishes that are then washed in a dishwasher? Like, I'm not that old, and that's what I had when I went to school. And the school district will save money by not having to purchase single-use plastic every day and then waste disposal. And there are some great groups in California working on this. Story of Stuff, Oceana, Californians Against Waste. But I think you get there when students and parents come together and say they want something along those lines. You know, we have a lot of single-use disposables, and you can debate, do you want to substitute plastic disposables with paper disposables? Well, I think paper is better than plastic in many instances, but the real future, unlike in the movie when the old guy told Dustin Hoffman the future is plastic, no, the future is reusables and refillables.
And is there a way for us as local consumers to, again, turn the responsibility back on the companies? Is it to try to pass local laws? Where can people get involved so that the ExxonMobils and more cases like Bonta is pushing forward happen?
Well, companies are not going to change on their own. So I'm a former federal regulator, so I think systemic change is new laws and strong enforcement of those laws. So yes, we need effective laws without loopholes to push that. So there are states around the country that have adopted something called extended producer responsibility, or EPR. California adopted that approach, requiring producers to pay a modest fee to pay for disposal of the packaging. It gives them some skin in the game. Mm-hmm. I don't think putting a fee on packaging is enough. So a strong extended producer responsibility law, like what is pending in the New York State Legislature in Albany, would require actual reductions in single-use plastic. So there's a bill that passed the New York State Senate that says you have to reduce your use of single-use plastic packaging by 30% over 12 years, and you have to get 17 of the most toxic chemicals used in packaging out of packaging. So who wants PFAS chemicals in packaging? Who wants lead? Who wants formaldehyde? Who wants mercury? That is currently in consumer packaging. So it's a quantity issue. We have to drive reduction, but it's also important to get the toxics out of packaging. And unfortunately, the California law, SB 54, does not address toxics. And the state was on its way to implementing the law through the agency called CalRecycle. And then at the 11th hour, Governor Newsom pulled the regulations back, and then they put out weaker regulations, and they pull that back again. I don't know what's happening with Governor Newsom on environmental issues, but in the past year, it has not been good. So that's where the public needs to get involved, and lawmakers.
I'm proud to say that my school in Berkeley does use what you were just describing. My daughter eats on these, I think, aluminum little plates.
Probably stainless steel.
But her soccer field is an artificial turf that they just put in. Tragic. Talk about artificial turf and what's happening now.
Yeah, so what's wrong with natural grass, right? It's better for athletes. It doesn't get really hot. But school districts and parks around the country are being convinced to install basically plastic grass that our children spend hours running around on, falling in. When your daughter comes home, it's probably in her clothes, it's in her hair, it's in her cleats. It's not, it's not good. And some of those products have PFAS in them. And when I talk to local officials who are thinking about installing it, the issue that I think compels some of them not to like the idea is that it gets so hot. And with climate change, our days are getting hotter and hotter. So if I was running a school or a park, I would really stay away from plastic artificial turf. But there's like a whole giant industry out there trying to sell school districts. The argument is that you don't have to maintain it as much. And then a lot of the parents of athletes who, not you, Leslie, but some of these parents think their children have futures in professional sports. And
No. My child has future
Yeah.
in professional sports. Just so you know.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
My 6-year-old's getting ready.
What's her name?
Isabel.
Isabel. We have to keep an eye on that. But the parents can get a little intense if they think that their kids are not getting enough playtime because the fields are wet. Right. So like go play in a puddle. But it's keep your eye on this issue. It's emerging. New York passed a law. Part of the law prohibits PFAS chemicals in indoor carpet and artificial turf outdoors. So that's a little plus, but just like ripping out real grass and installing plastic turf, that feels like end of the world stuff to me.
And I think there's at least 1 or 2 communities in the Bay Area who have been successful at removing it. And so I offer that to all of you as, an easy way potentially to get involved in city council meetings or your local communities, make sure that more artificial turf isn't added to your parks and your schools. You mentioned there that my kid's going to come home with a bunch of plastic on her, and those are, we move into microplastics. Let's talk about what are microplastics, how are they getting into us, and why is that not a great thing? Into us and the animals.
Yeah. Into every part of the world, really. Microplastics have been found, in isolated western forested areas where you don't see a lot of people.
Alpine Lake.
Yeah, the Mariana Trench. So microplastics are little shards of plastic 5 millimeters or less, and then even smaller than that is nanoplastics. Very serious health implications. So the way we are getting microplastics in our bodies is we're breathing it in or we're swallowing it. So you could breathe it in from indoor carpet, from your clothing. You could swallow it if you have a plastic water bottle and you turn the plastic cap, there's a little abrasion, and little pieces of plastic will fall into your beverage.
Your salt and pepper shakers are plastic.
Your cutting board, get rid of plastic cutting boards at home. There are many, many ways that we get microplastics into our bodies. Now, unfortunately, scientists have found microplastics in our blood, in our kidneys, in our lungs, in the human placenta, both the fetal side and the maternal side. Microplastics have been found in breast milk. And when I lobby on plastics issues in various legislative bodies, often the legislators pay attention when I say microplastics have been found in testicles. It's true. And so for a couple years, the plastics industry said, yeah, you've got microplastics in your blood and your kidneys, but you're excreting a lot of it, and there's no proof that it causes harm. Well, we excrete some of it, but not all of it. And just in the past year, there were 2 really important studies that show harm. So New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most well-respected medical journals in the country, identified microplastics in our neck arteries, and it attaches to plaque. And when they removed plaque and found microplastics, they found that the patient had an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, or premature death. And then not long after that, there was a study looking at whether or not microplastics cross the blood-brain barrier, and unfortunately found that it does. And when it does, you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease and neurological damage. So that is serious. And then there's very important work going on with plastics, including mostly the chemicals in plastics and plasticizers, and how it affects fertility, your ability to reproduce. And in March 16th, a really important movie is coming out on Netflix that you should all watch, called Plastic Detox. And it looks at the impact of plastic on people's ability to conceive children. And it is the brilliant voice in the movie is a local resident, Dr. Shauna Swan, who's here tonight, who has done pioneering scientific work looking at reproductive toxins. And I happen to have seen the movie, so I watch a lot of environmental movies. I'm a lot of fun. So
Really uplifting.
Yeah, so honey, what do you want to watch tonight? It's Saturday night. I think there's something on nuclear war. Let's watch it. But this movie is extraordinary. I have seen it. It will move you. It'll move the country. And thankfully, it's coming out on Netflix. So look for this, Plastic Detox, mid-March. And it really should give policymakers pause on why they pass bills that have loopholes, that are not actually going to reduce the use of plastic. My prediction is that in the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to have policymakers and business leaders look back and say, we knew enough to act. Why didn't we? And that's why the health issues of plastics are so urgent and should move the needle. And so just for you personally, people ask me a million questions about how to reduce plastics in their life. And it's not just because of the climate change issues and the fact that we're turning the ocean into a watery landfill. For your own health and your children's health, you should try to avoid plastic. It's fossil fuel and chemicals. I don't want to be drinking and eating that.
Before we take you down and make you completely despondent about the future, tell us about some of the characters in your book who are really inspiring and really could be, someone in this room could be sitting here and will be written about in your next book.
My next book.
Of course there's going to be.
It's going to be a novel.
Okay.
I have stories. So I will admit this can be a daunting issue, right? Because when I started Beyond Plastics about 6 or 7 years ago, some of my friends who really cared about me said, what are you doing? You should be at the point in your career where you're downshifting a little bit. Go site solar panels somewhere. Have a job that pays well, you have weekends off. And I said, that is overrated.
No, I'm going to take on plastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I did. So it's a little overwhelming when you're taking on the fossil fuel, the plastics, the chemical, and the consumer brand companies all at the same time. But there are victories all over the country. I do want to point out that most of this advocacy is led by women. And in the book, we profile a number of women, and I could have done many, many more. But women like Diane Wilson, who's a 4th-generation shrimper who lives on a bay in Texas, who's taking on Formosa Plastics because they have released billions of those little pre-production plastics that we talked about earlier that are made at ethane cracker facilities. They have a sweet name called nurdles, but there's nothing sweet about them. Diane Wilson filed a citizen suit under the Clean Water Act and won the largest Clean Water Act settlement in the history of the Clean Water Act, while we still have a Clean Water Act. Sharon Levine lives in Cancer Alley in Louisiana, a retired special ed teacher, a mom of 6, and she's taking on Formosa Plastics, who wants to build large plastic production facilities literally near her backyard, and she's already defeated one of them. I want to point out the amazing work of Debbie Lee Cohen from New York City, whose two little girls were going to public school in New York City, and Debbie Lee Cohen and other parents were concerned that they were eating hot lunches off of polystyrene trays. So you don't even often get the plates. The hot food is just put right on the polystyrene tray. So Debbie Lee Cohen connected with other parents, and she got the largest school district in the country, New York City Public Schools, to stop using polystyrene trays. And that was an incredible accomplishment. And then she went on to found this group in New York City called Cafeteria Culture. And they have this great movie called Microplastic Madness. If you're a teacher, you can use their curriculum. And whenever I feel just a little blue sometimes, which is like every day, I watch the trailer of Microplastic Madness because it is so inspiring. She and Atsuko Quirk profile public school kids in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And then sadly, we lost Debbie Lee Cohen to cancer recently, which is just a terrible, terrible loss. And I could go on and on. The leadership of women on this issue is extraordinary, and that's why I'm optimistic.
Speaking of cancer, I went to school, I was mentioning that to you in the green room, in Louisiana, in Cancer Alley between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. I think the cancer rates are 7 times higher.
Yes.
Do you want to read the dedication of your book?
I do. So Cancer Alley and parts of Appalachia and Port Arthur, Texas, people live, they're called fence line communities. The petrochemical facilities go right up to people's backyard fences or their playgrounds.
And if you've ever been to Cancer Alley, you know this, but driving, it's like driving under these lights
Yes.
for an hour and a half of these huge plants just spewing the most toxic air. It's abominable that this is in our country.
Yes, in the United States in this year. And the state of Louisiana and the state of Texas do not enforce environmental laws. And the federal EPA, under this administration, is also not vigorously enforcing environmental laws. So your health outcome is dictated by your zip code, and that is unconscionable. So this is the dedication of the book. By design, low-income people and communities of color bear the burden of plastics. The destructive web of plastics gathers in their neighborhoods, rivers, air, and bodies. We dedicate this book to those living in the shadow of plastics facilities in Louisiana, Texas, Appalachia, and elsewhere, in the sincere belief that they should live in a world beyond plastics and that such a world is within our reach.
On that note, how much of our plastic ends up in communities far beyond our borders?
You mean overseas? Yes, a lot. There's the plastic waste trade, where a lot of plastic is exported to other countries, where they do not have an infrastructure to deal with all of the plastic. This is best described in the Emmy Award-winning film called The Story of Plastic, which I highly recommend. It's put out by the nonprofit here in the Bay Area, The Story of Stuff. And it shows big ships going to Vietnam, Malaysia, the Philippines, where plastic is deposited. Low-income people pick through it. They look for the number 1 and number 2 plastic. They will often bring it back to their homes where it's heated in outdoor ovens and then chopped up almost like little strands of spaghetti. There's never been a study on the health impacts of people doing this in their own homes. And then most of the plastic is not recyclable. So it then becomes, it's washed into rivers and into the ocean. This is also a big issue in Turkey for some reason. So the export of plastics is terrible. And there's another Bay Area group, Basel Action Network, ban.org that tracks all of this international waste trade of plastic. And it's so irresponsible when a lot of the plastic companies say, oh, this is just a problem over there, and they don't have adequate sanitation. Well, we're shipping our plastic to them. And also, in California, plastic is shipped to Mexico, because you really cannot recycle most plastics. It's not safe to burn at garbage incinerators. When you burn plastic, you get small amounts of dioxin created as a byproduct of combustion. Dioxin is the most toxic chemical known to science. And then it fills up landfills. So there's a lot of work to be done to reduce the generation of plastic. We can't recycle our way out of the problem. Now, this is the part where I need to say that there are some needed uses of plastics. So, for instance, wind turbines have plastic parts in them. Cars are more fuel efficient with plastic bumpers rather than metal bumpers. But I've never seen parts of wind turbines in my local park. I'm concerned about the excessive use of plastic in the healthcare. There are some needed uses, but it's just swung way too far. But there's so much we can do to get rid of pointless plastic, and that's most plastic.
I think you said in our last conversation, was it one semi-truck of plastic goes into the ocean every second? Am I remembering that right?
2 every minute.
Jeez, every minute. I don't know if anyone's seen those pictures, those crazy pictures of, what is it, the great great garbage patch?
Yeah, the GYRE, G-Y-R-E.
And that's just the stuff at the surface, right? Most of it is...
Yeah, it's, those pictures of the plastic islands are not great, but they're also a little deceptive, because as you say, most of the plastic falls to the bottom of the sea, and it gets built up in the marine environment. And once it's in the ocean, it's all but impossible to get it back.
So, a member of the audience, I'll move to questions from the audience now. Thank you all for adding these. And a question we all have is compostable plastic hopeful? Can we get our way out of this? But I mean, and you can't go to a birthday party in Berkeley these days without it being compostable plastic. Silverware.
Yeah, so we issued a report on bio-based plastics or compostable plastics. It's well-intentioned. People are paying extra money for compostable plastics. It only actually gets composted if it goes to a commercial composting operation, which is high temperature, and most communities in the country don't have it. There are some in the Bay Area. And then you just have to make sure that there are no chemical additives in the packaging. So it's not just about the material, it's about the chemical additives. And we have a report on our website, beyondplastics.org, and we have a handy little brochure with a checklist of 10 questions you want to ask.
So should you not buy it? Like the next time that I go to Costco, is it worth getting?
I don't buy it, but it's up to you.
There's several questions in here I'm noticing about Ridwell. Tell us whether this is a company that you can drop a white box on the front of your front porch. You can fill it with all the plastic stuff that the city won't pick up. Okay, tell us about it.
Sorry.
They promise that they will recycle the stuff that the city can't recycle, and you pay for this service.
You pay a lot of money. It's what do they call it? The difficult to recycle plastics or the hard to recycle plastics, which is most plastics, right? So it's chip bags, and other companies use cigarette butts that have plastic in it. First of all, I don't like the subscription service. Like, recycling should be accessible to everyone. It should be easy. You shouldn't have to pay another $20 a month to get your difficult or hard to recycle plastics picked up. And it's not really clear where it all goes. I'm skeptical that there are markets for some of this difficult to recycle stuff.
So do you think Ridwell is just a money-making machine then?
Well, let me answer it this way. I wouldn't subscribe.
Bummer.
I know, it's well-intentioned.
Yeah.
People are willing to pay extra money, but I don't think it's a sustainable solution to the plastics crisis. And you're still using the plastic.
Are there some companies that are models of non-plastic packaging or reducing plastic use, companies that you want to highlight doing good work?
Yeah, so I can't necessarily endorse a particular company, but there are a lot of companies that have moved away from plastic. Plain Products is one. You can get personal care products that it's in stainless steel, and when the container is empty, you mail it back to them and you get something back full. There's a company called Blue Land. You can get these soap products and you get these little tablets and you just add water. And they're now in brick and mortar stores. You can get them in Target, although we're boycotting Target, so don't get it there. Target's the only store I'm sharing too much. I like to shop in Target, and I haven't been there in like a year. But you can get Blue Land in Walgreens, and a lot of the stuff is internet, but that's a whole other book. There are local dairies that you can get refillable milk bottles. Years ago, Coke sold soda in refillable glass bottles. They can go back to that. I wouldn't advocate that Coke is a good actor here. There are a lot of refill stores opening all over the country, which is very encouraging. These are small businesses. You bring your own jars, your own containers, you fill everything up. And many food co-ops have that already. What?
Rainbow Co-op, you can fill up everything there.
Yeah, so food co-ops have been ahead of the curve. I always like the part of the session when people start yelling out examples from the audience. So, and these companies, they're mostly B Corps, and they are doing well. People are looking for alternatives to plastic.
I got to read this one. I'm a fifth grade teacher in Berkeley at Thousand Oaks Elementary. I took your class. My students are reading and studying the book called Trash Vortex. We lobbied our school district to eliminate single-use plastic from our lunch and breakfast program. Nice work. We have had huge success in eliminating most of it, but we still have more work to do. How can I give my students hope for the future?
Oh, there is enormous hope. I mean, accomplishing that is great, and there are smart teachers all over the country doing this. They're bringing students to school board meetings, always fun. And, schools are little bureaucracies, so you just kind of have to keep at it. But what I'm excited about with school programs, and again, Miriam Gordon with Story of Stuff is doing really important work on this, is if you get your school to look at how much money they're spending buying single-use plastics that our darling children and grandchildren are eating off of, look at what they're spending on that and look at their waste disposal costs and the economics for real dishes and dishwashing equipment, really makes sense. The other option, not just in schools, that I'm excited about is public water fountains and refill stations. I mean, the San Francisco airport was the first in the country, I believe, to stop selling plastic water bottles, and then they extended it to all plastic bottles, and then they very wisely installed water refill stations everywhere. We need that in bus stations. We need that in train stations. We need that on Main Street. There's this lovely little community in Western Massachusetts, and up and down the Main Street are really attractive water fountains. Remember water fountains? And now they have lower versions for dogs. That makes it very popular because everyone wants their dog to have water, and the days are getting hotter. And so we need a grassroots movement on water fountains. And it's such a happy topic. Who could be against water fountains? Why don't we have them? And then school programs, and then in Berkeley, if you go to eat on site, dine in the restaurant, you're served on real dishes. That's because of a local law. So the key here is to take all the great information in the book, and you're concerned about health, and figure out what you can do, first in your own life, then perhaps in a civic organization that you're involved in, your faith community. Let's get rid of all of the single-use plastics and replace it with real dishes. You're going to have success on all of those levels. And then you go to the city council meeting and you share ideas. And then before you know it, you are in the state legislature and you are buttonholing lawmakers.
You are our next president is sitting in this room right now.
Yeah, Isabel. So it just makes sense. And the only thing we're up against is the enormous political influence of the chemical, fossil fuel, and plastics industry.
That's it.
But we can overcome that with people power. You know, we're working on thank you for clapping. We're working on this really important bill in the state legislature in Albany, and I've never seen so many special interest lobbyists out to kill a bill. So we looked at the lobbying commission reports, and we found 106 special interest lobbyists opposing the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. We still got it through the state Senate, this close in the Assembly. We're going to keep working. Plastic pollution is not going away, and neither are we. And it's the people power, especially in an election year. Yes, you know, elected officials, they take campaign contributions, they go out for unhealthy meals with lobbyists, but ultimately they need votes, and that's what's going to make the difference.
Speaking of those lobbyists, one of their arguments that they often make is that plastic is a lot lighter, and so therefore it is climate friendly. If we switch from glass, or we switch back to glass, are we creating another problem in terms of climate change?
Well, this is one thing that the plastics industry is correct on. It's lighter. We all know that. But there are climate change impacts, and there are groups, Holly Kaufman and others, who are specifically working on climate and plastics, and there are health impacts. So you've got to look at all of it. And also the thing about glass is, yeah, it's heavier, but you can make it from recycled material, and it is recyclable. And you can't really say that about plastic. But I concede, it is lighter.
What are the prospects of an international agreement to reduce the production of plastics? Are other countries moving to reduce exposure to plastics and microplastics?
Yes, the EU is ahead of the United States. The United Nations has proposed an international plastics treaty, and there have been really important negotiations going on internationally all over the world. And unfortunately, no agreement was reached. However, just last week, the negotiators met again and made a really important decision, and that is that an international agreement will not require consensus, which is smart. And you know who was just a terrible actor at these UN negotiations? Guess. Yeah, Saudi Arabia, Russia, the United States, and they very much want to narrow the treaty to deal with waste. How do we keep plastics out of the ocean? That's important, but that's not the whole ball game. So I am not optimistic that the U.S. is going to have a good position over the next 3 years, but other countries can work together and really set the stage, because it would be good to have an international treaty, and it would be good for the United States to stop dumping on other countries.
Can you please leave us with a little bit of hope, Judith?
Yes. Well, you know, there's actually a chapter in the book called, Reasons for Hope, or something like that. There is amazing work happening all over the country. This is an accessible issue because we all are touching plastic every day in our lives. We have to keep working on climate change, of course. But a lot of people think of climate change, it's in the atmosphere. I'm not a power plant operator. What can I do? There's a lot you can do on climate change, but plastic it feels more personal. So people are taking action. At my organization, Beyond Plastics, we want to build the grassroots movement against plastic pollution. So we started something called Local Groups and Affiliates, because I couldn't think of a better name. And we have 189 of them all over the country. And 2 years ago, we got a call from an activist who wanted to ban plastic bags in their community. And we said, great, here's a model plastic bag ban, here's a fact sheet, here's everything you need. And they checked in, it's looking good, they passed it. What they didn't tell us is within their community is the King of Prussia Mall in Pennsylvania, which is one of the largest shopping malls in the country. They're no longer handing out plastic bags. So people are doing amazing things with information. But I want to address that there is a lot going on in the world.
If you haven't noticed.
Yeah, it's not just about plastics. And you want to think about, what can I do as one person? And I think one person really can make a difference, especially if you work constantly and you're humorless and you don't have a social life.
And you want to watch documentaries on your Friday nights?
Yeah, you can get stuff done. But, oh no, I'm joking. But, watching the news every day is hard, and that's difficult for political junkies. Like, I used to like reading the newspaper in the morning.
I work in the business. It's a little hard.
You know. But I constantly read this quote that I want to share with you, and this gives me hope. This is centuries ago by Rabbi Tarfon, and you're probably familiar with some part of this. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. That's what we all need to do.
And I'll just say that we in the media would love to tell some more good stories because we know that we're telling you a lot of bad stories. So be one of the stories that we can highlight going forward from Judith's talk. Again, her book is The Problem with Plastic: How Can We Save Ourselves and Our Planet Before It's Too Late? She will stick around to do a signing of this book. It's a really wonderful read, and I highly recommend it. It's very applicable to your everyday lives.
Yes. Thank you so much for your enlightening comments. I mean, wow.
Good job. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.